And I don't know, it's just my favorite. And I've done every age. So it's really, it's a huge that I could say they're my favorite. So one thing that the pandemic has brought us, besides, you know, financial meltdown and a health crisis, it's brought us a lot of Karen videos. And if your name is Karen, I'm so sorry that you are tied into this bundle of people, but we're going to watch a little Karen video to set the mood for this session.
This is AAC Karen. AAC Karen uses aided language input.
I like it.
AAC Karen attributes meaning.
The great white shark can have as many as 3,000 teeth at one time. Open. You want him to open his mouth?
AAC Karen creates opportunities for communication throughout the day.
Oh, what did you need? Did you need help? Ask for help.
Help.
Oh, okay. Let me open that for you. There you go.
But when it comes time to graduate,
Congratulations, here you go. I'll be taking this. It's not yours. Give it back.
don't be an AAC Karen. Help your students get their own AAC system when they graduate. You'll be glad you did.
All right, so we do not want to be Karen, do we? So when we're talking about why should we help families and students get a personally owned AAC system, the reason is this. When you look at the emotional stages of post-high parents, from the ages of 18 to 24, they are in denial. I cannot tell you how many meetings I sat in where the parents, when we got to that transition page and said, well, you know, your student's going to be leaving school when they're 26. They do this, la, la, la. I don't want to hear it. They're never leaving school. And then come age of 25, it is full on panic. What is my child going to do all day? What do you mean the program isn't 5 days a week? Oh my gosh. So communication may not be the first thing on their mind. And right now, we've got a pandemic, so people are at home with their children 24/7. So, you know, they have other things on their mind. So any and all help that we can give them is going to be a good thing. All right, so I wanted to just, this graphic kind of shows the entire process of getting a communication system through insurance, and we're going to go through each step. I got most of this information from this really great website. It's the PRC Saltillo funding website, and it has tons of great information. So if you have additional questions, this is a fantastic place to go. This is in the note catcher, so you do not have to worry about writing that down or trying to go to it right now. So let's look at the process. The first thing you need to do is assemble your team. The people in yellow are the required people for the team. Got to have your student, got to have an ASHA certified SLP, and you have to have a physician. And the student is going to need to have a face-to-face visit with the doctor within some reasonable period of time before you start this process. If the student hasn't been to the doctor in 5 years, they need to go in and have an appointment. The doctor will be required to submit face-to-face notes. Obviously, we want to include our parent or guardian because they're going to be supporting the student in this process. Any caregivers that are going to be working with the student would also be important to include. And one of the people that I always want to dial in would be the Community Agency Supports Coordinator. Most students from 18 to 26 are affiliated with a community agency that supports adults with disabilities. So we want to make sure that their supports coordinator knows that this is going on. They can be very helpful with making sure that students get to doctor's appointments and making sure that parents sign forms. So they're a good person to have on your team. Another person I didn't put on the slide, but group home managers. If your student does not live at home, I had a couple of group home managers where I said, okay, the mom's saying the student doesn't even have a doctor. What are we going to do? And the group home manager said, I'll make the appointment. I'll make sure that she gets there and we'll take care of it. And they did. So it was awesome. So there's all kinds of people that can help you with this process. The next thing is checking the funding sources. So it's a good idea to have the parent find out what their coverage is for speech generating devices. So in this presentation, when we're talking medically speaking, AAC devices are called speech generating devices. So a lot of times what I would do is I would identify a couple of vendors that carry the products that I want to order for the student and submit the student's health cards, front and back copy of their health cards, and see if the vendor will work with that insurance company. If not, then I have the parent call and see what else we can do. Medicaid is pretty easy. Medicaid has been very good about covering devices. If they have a mixed situation or private insurance, it's a little bit stickier. But Medicaid, boom, usually approved right away, which is surprising to me, but. Then someone needs to complete the speech generating device evaluation. When I worked at Kingsley Montgomery School in Waterford, I did those evaluations myself, but you know, it just has to be a certified SLP. You can send the student out to have that evaluation done privately if that, you know, if that's the way your plan or you want to do it. So it's really up to you, and we're going to talk a little bit later on all the various ways and various levels of support we can provide. But we have access to all of the students' IEPs from way, way back, so we have a lot of information to write that report. So sometimes it's just easier for us to do it. All right, so once you have your evaluation completed, there's a funding packet to assemble. Unfortunately, this is not the old days. You don't have any paper. Typically what you're doing is submitting things electronically to a website. And I probably will talk about AbleNet a couple of times during this presentation. AbleNet doesn't pay me any money. I have no financial relationship with them, but I have used them for getting devices for my students, and they really do have superior customer service. So all I had to do was submit the insurance cards. If they were willing to work with the student's insurance company, from there, I submitted my evaluation report, and they did everything else. They faxed everything to the doctor. They got signatures from the parent. They did everything else. So it saved me a lot of time. So I highly recommend that. But if you're doing an iPad with an app on it, I highly recommend AbleNet for that. And then the funding packet goes to the insurance company, and they either approve or deny. If the claim is rejected, you may have to adjust your report with whatever information they felt was missing. I have been rejected one time, and it was because I didn't know what I was doing. So I know better now. And it was just a couple of minor things I needed to change. I resubmitted it, and it was approved. So, but it really depends a lot on the type of insurance that your student has. One thing that I've found to be useful is I tell the parents up front, if I'm going to help them through the process, I will say, I'll do my bit. You have to do your bit, and it all needs to be done by the student's last day of school. If they have not done their part with the insurance, haven't signed their forms, haven't submitted what they need, it's done the last day, and they're going to have to do that process themselves with a private evaluation from outside. So I always put that boundary because I don't want this to go on years and years after the student has left. So I think that's fair enough. And then the AAC system arrives, and here's myself and one of my students after she got her device, and we had a little party in the classroom, and it was a lot of fun. The device will come locked into the app. So just be aware of that. If you want to load your students' personal pages on there, you can contact the company. They will give you a temporary unlock code if you're an SLP, and you can load their page sets. The parents can also get an unlock code so that they can use other apps on the iPad. But, and that can cost anywhere between $5 and $50, depending on the company. And it also depends on the insurance coverage. Some insurance companies will not unlock the device ever. Another point to remember is the device is shipped to the student's home. So if they live in a group home, you want to give the group home manager a heads up that it's coming and to watch out for it, so that, you know, the staff doesn't open it up and go, sweet, free iPad, and then the student doesn't have anything. So just be aware of that. So the question is, why should we do this? And ASHA's real big. So if you're an SLP, ASHA is our national organization. They're very big on ethics right now. And I really just couldn't sleep at night knowing that I've worked very hard to build a communication system. I couldn't sleep at night knowing I was sending that student off with nothing. So I really wanted to make sure that parents knew how to get through this process. And if I could help them, I did. Continuity. You've had the student all along, you know what's been successful and worked for them, so why not assist further in that process? And back to that first graphic, these parents need support. They're overwhelmed by all of the changes that are about to happen. So they need a little support from us in this process. And then the school team, we know this student. Typically, a lot of times we've had the student for a long time. We know everything about them. So oftentimes you have your PTs and your OTs and all the other people that you might need information from right there. So this can be really, it can be a little bit easier for us to write that report because we know the student so well. And one thing I forgot to put on this slide, and I will say I was too lazy to go back in and add it, is that safety. Eventually, our students are going to be cared for by people that they don't know well. So we need a way for them to be able to report if something happens to them. I did have a student a few years ago who was being abused in his group home, and his communication was not at a level where he was able to tell us, but his behavior was telling us that something was wrong. And then we started to see some physical evidence of that as well. So that's really heartbreaking. So we want to be going, some people say, oh, well, when they're 18 to 26, you know, is it really that important speech anymore? Yes, it is, because they are in the danger zone. They are starting to go out into the world. So we want to make sure that they, to the best of their ability, can communicate their needs and when something is wrong and when someone is harming them. So what I did was I made this SLP guidance document. Obviously, it would be a good information for teachers to review, but because the SLPs are the ones that have to write the report, it is really geared more towards those of you who are SLPs. And this document is just something I made based on the experiences that I had, along with information from the vendor websites. So this isn't necessarily an Oakland school document, but I put it out there because when I started doing this, I didn't know what I was doing, and I had to learn from, the sales reps, from the vending companies and all that stuff. So I just wanted to make it easier for all of you to go through this process. The way to use this document is, this is just a sample for you so that you can go back to your district and develop your own policies and procedures. You can adapt this to suit the needs of your district and their families. And I did ask the folks in compliance about what Oakland Schools' stand is on this issue, and they take a neutral position. This is very similar to guardianship. Oakland Schools does not say you have to help your families through the guardianship process, and they don't say not to do it. So they allow the districts to make that choice for themselves. So, and it's the same thing with AAC. They said, it's up to the individual district how they want to handle it. So this is just something to have a conversation with your director, your principal, about how you want to handle this issue. And there are various levels of support that you can provide, and we're going to talk about some of those. And those of you who are experienced in this, at the end, please jump in with your updated bits of knowledge. Let's see. So I basically came up with 4 ways that you can support families. And we're going to go to the guidance document and talk about each of those ways that you can support. And I'm hoping my computer will work a little faster than it was earlier today. Okay. So the beginning is just an intro. And we've got there it goes. My scroll is working very slowly. So we've got an intro, we've got some information about the process. Come on, baby. And then we have the different ways that you can support. The top one is parent supported. You can provide the parents with information about the process, some clinics that perform AAC evaluations, and sort of help them make the appointment and get that evaluation done, all outside. And I got this information, I pretty much took it. Laura Cusimano from Wing Lake basically sent me this document, and I pretty much used it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's a good document. It's got good information. This is something that you could give to a parent to help them understand how to go through this process. And Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the feeling from talking to you that you actually sort of nag the families gently a little to make sure they've made their appointments and they're getting through the process. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, yes. So usually what we do at Wing Lake, I started to do what you did, Kristen, way back when I first started at Wing Lake, where I went and I actually did the, I'm trying to get out of stupid mode here. Hold on, I'm trying to see where I can see you guys. It's not working. Sorry. So I want you guys to be able to see my face. I know that's rude. Here we go.
Okay, there you are.
Can you guys see me now?
I can see you. Yep.
Okay, so back when I first started at Wing Lake, we did do where I was actually the one trying to acquire getting devices for the kids, and it is a pain in the butt, I'll be honest. And I ended up finding out where I had a few kids that I was like years after they had graduated was still working on their AAC systems. Particularly Medicaid was very picky back in the day that, like, they would say, I'd give this whole spiel about this kid, and he's basically quadriplegic in his wheelchair and can't move anything except his eyes. So he had an eye gaze device, and they denied me 3 times because I did not put that he could not carry his device on a strap on his arm. And I'm like, well, he's a quadriplegic and can't move any part of his limb, so I don't know what you don't understand about that, but okay. So right. It's very time consuming. So basically at Wing Lake, what we do, when this was just happening and I was spending years after the kids had graduated, which I didn't mind doing because I wanted the kids to have their own devices. But my boss kind of put the kibosh on that. She said, no, we're not doing that anymore. But anyway, so we go through an outside agency now And I do have a person that I usually work with, but and that information, she's on that sheet that I provided
Yeah.
with her. But we basically at Wing Lake, so if I have a student that is graduating this year from Wing Lake, we have already started the process during last year's IEP process. So when we have that IEP, I say to the parents, okay, this is what's going to happen within the next year. I need you to make an appointment with whatever place you choose to go through. So we are starting a year even before they graduate, because we know it takes about a good year for kids to get their devices. So we start the process at Wing Lake well over a year prior to them actually graduating.
Yes. And I'm so glad you're here, because I really wanted you to talk about this. Because I know your experience, and Laura is a good resource for some of these things. And this is a good plan. She is supporting the parents through the process. She's not doing the evaluation. She's cutting herself out of that commitment that might go on, but she's helping them along. She's making sure they're doing what they need to do. So this is a good option. If you do nothing else, please do this, right? Please
Absolutely.
do this. Okay.
A lot of my kids too, I have a great relationship with their parents, and they are already seeking outside services themselves. So I have usually, I'll be honest, the person that we usually go with is Pat Nazio.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's the one, and so a lot of my kids that go and have AAC systems and go on after and graduate with them, they're already seeing her as a therapist. And so Pat and I kind of, we have a good working relationship, and I'll call her and say, so-and-so graduating in the year, we got to get going on this. And then we kind of start the process together. But one of the things too that a lot of people don't know is that there has to be an OT evaluation and a PT evaluation. And a lot of parents get stuck up on that. So at Wing Lake, what we do, we always provide our graduates with a report from OT, PT, and speech that's dated within, it has to be within that year that you're trying to acquire a device. So we always provide our parents with a PT, OT, and speech evaluation that's dated within that year that basically just describes everything that the kid can and can't do. So that kind of helps the process go along quicker also, because then the parents at the clinic where they go to do not have to go outside and get an OT evaluation and a PT evaluation, because they already have one from Wing Lake. So that's kind of how we do ours at Wing Lake.
And that's funny, Laura, because it's interesting you're talking about the PT and OT stuff, because I didn't have to do that.
Oh, really? Well, I've always, Pat and I, and whoever else I've worked with that hasn't been Pat, parents come to me and say, I have to go get an OT and PT evaluation. I'm like, well, you have one right here. And it usually, we just provide the report, and then it suffices for them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was worked directly with Toby Dynavox. They never asked for any of that, but that depends on I don't. There might have been something in the packet that I had to note that they.
Right. Well, and that may be something that's more just for if you go to an outpatient therapy clinic, that may be their requirements since coming from. And I know that, like, I have 3 students right now that had graduated past last year due to COVID, have gotten really messed up. Their evaluations were backed up like 6 months. So I have 3 kiddos right now that are just now requiring a device within the next 3 or 4 weeks. And they also, one of the new things that happened is that they have to go to at least 3 to 4 actual therapy sessions with the speech path at, let's say it's Pat Nazio at Beaumont, then they have to she has to treat them for at least 3 or 4 sessions before they will give her the device. So that's another requirement too. So,
and I don't think that that's an insurance requirement. Well, it like you put in the report that you're going to see them, but I always do it early enough so that those can just be therapy sessions.
Right.
And we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But thank you, Laura, so much. I'm so glad I was really hoping that you would come, because I wanted you to address that issue. So I probably should have warned you, but thank you.
Sorry. That's why I called you yesterday in a panic. I'm like, is this the one about transition? Because I was like,
yeah. So thank you again, Laura.
You're welcome.
A good resource for this stuff.
Anybody can call anytime.
Yes, please do.
Kristen, there's a question in the chat for Laura about whether she has a template or guidelines for that OTPT assessment or request.
We will, so I think she is correct in saying that may be the clinic's requirement, because I was not required to do that. So we're going to go through the report in a little bit, and that will help everybody see what they're asking for. And there are some sample templates that I will give you, that I will will share links to that you can see what they're asking for. So that may clear up some of that situation, but it's not, the last several students that I did, I had to note their fine and, like their physical abilities, but they didn't specifically ask for an OTPT report. And I still got approved. So I don't know, that will be something to, I will explore that for all of you and answer that question. So I will find out, is it the clinics thing, or is it something that's required now or changed? But I did my last one very recently. So it depends. It probably depends on what your situation is. So this is a form that I used a lot. So this is if you are going to help them, the family, part of the way. Like, let's say you just are going to do the report and write that up and give it to them. I also use this form for the parents that haven't done their bit. The process wasn't completed because you didn't give us copies of your health insurance, you didn't sign the medical release, the physician prescription didn't come through, the school identified vendors did not take the student's insurance. So that, whatever reason it didn't go through, you can note that there. And then it tells the family how to continue the process and what they should do next. So if I am unable to get a vendor that's going to take that student's insurance, I at least give them the report and the information about who to call at their insurance company to continue this process. So that is another form of support that you can provide. Fully school supported means that you're going to walk that family through the entire process. I was very successful at doing this, especially if we were looking at getting an iPad with a communication app and the student had Medicaid. If those three things come together, I typically worked with AbleNet. I'm going to say it again, not getting paid by them, but I lost my train of thought. But anyway, really all I had to do was submit the insurance card, see if the vendor took their insurance, and write the SGD evaluation report. And the vendor did everything else. The family did have to get the student to a doctor if they had not been in a while. That was, on the part of the family, and sign a couple of forms, and boom, that was it. And I always want families to know that the process takes a long time. Like Laura said, you want to start as early as you can. If it's not completed by graduation, you're going to have to do it yourself. And if the device breaks and needs to be replaced, you need to contact your insurance company regarding repair or replacement. I went to a workshop where a private SLP from California was talking about how she met some families of adults with disabilities who said, well, my son had a device and it broke and then that was it. And they didn't realize they could contact the insurance company and look into a repair or a replacement. If your wheelchair breaks, you can't go around without a wheelchair, got to be repaired or replaced. This is the same thing, and this is just as necessary. So make sure your parents are aware of that. And I also added this statement: the school is not responsible for this equipment, so they don't call me 3 years from now and say, hey, the device is broken, can you do something? Because no, I cannot. The last area is talking about those low-tech devices. So your recordable things, your GoTalks, your Big Macs, all that kind of stuff, those are not covered by insurance at all. They are less expensive, and there are some ways to get them. The first one is maybe that family can just buy it. Graduation gift, birthday gift, Christmas gift, whatever. Another thing, and this is why you want to get your community agency involved, and usually in Oakland County, students are linked to either Macomb Oakland Regional Center, which we affectionately call MORC, or Community Living Services, which is CLS. They often have grant money available for purchase of communication devices, and typically they're purchasing these lower tech kinds of devices. I did get a student a Go Talk using this process. I think I had to write a letter, just a short letter explaining what his needs were and what equipment he was using, and he was able to get that. There are also some secondhand vendors that are trusted. So you can go to, you know, the families can pursue that through the company that manufactures the equipment. And then at the bottom, I just made a little table, and this is an example. So if the student's using a Big Mac, you give them a link to the manufacturer, some places that they can buy that, and the approximate price. So you put all their equipment in there so they know what the student has and where they can get that equipment. So that is the way to deal with those low-tech devices. So if we head further down in the document, I made a list of companies that supply communication systems, and that came from this website that's linked here. And I separated it into companies that provide iPads with communication apps and cases. And what they do is they do a prepackaged iPad case and app, just like we do at Oakland schools. AbleNet does it, Tobii Dynavox does it. There are several other companies, PRC does it. And then if your students require other access methods like eye gaze, or they're using switches, Tobii Dynavox, PRC, and Forbes are 3 that do that. And then low-tech devices, I put the names of some companies that sell some of those low-tech devices, and also some companies that sell low-tech mounts if you need mounts for switches. So that's just some extra information in there in this document. And I think I'm at the end of that. So let's go back to the report, okay? And Laura is correct in saying that writing this report is a pain. But once you get, you know, there are lots and lots of templates out there. That is the good news. This is one of my templates that I use that I actually got a device with. So I have one for ASD, I have one for cognitive impairment, and I have one for physical impairment. And then in your note catcher, there's a link to the AAC funding website for PRC and Saltillo. And that has tons of templates. You name the disability, they probably have a template, a report template for it. It does need to be in this very specific format with these specific sections, but any of those templates, copy and paste, fill in the information relevant to your student, and you're good to go. But to help you to figure out where I'm going to find all of this information, I did create this document. This is where to find those sources of information. This is also in the note catcher, if it ever comes up. Here it is. So running down the left-hand side are the sections of the report. Here are the subsections, and this part tells you where you might find that information. So they do ask for information about the student's physical ability. You can get those things from your PT and OT reports, your IEP. If there's no physical ability, you can use teacher and parent observations. What they want to know is the student is physically able to use the communication system that you are recommending, because there's no point in getting a system if they cannot use it physically. You know, vision, they want to ensure that you have a communication system that the student can see and interact with, or that you've accommodated for their vision. So that is how that section works. So you go through all the areas: cognitive, language. I put some assessments that you can use to demonstrate language skills that we like to use. And then there's a section on their daily communication needs. You're going to want to get your parent. Who are they going to be talking to? Where are they going to be going? Because that will all factor into what kind of device and what kind of case you are going to choose for the student. And what else do we have?
Kristen?
Yes.
I was just going to say, when you're writing this report, just make sure that you are as obvious as possible. Because even if you think that what you have stated is really good and they're going to get a good picture of what the student can and can't do, insurances ask the stupidest questions, and you're just like, seriously, I just answered that right here. So be as specific as possible, because I mean, on one student, Kristen, you're lucky you only had one denial. On one of my students, I literally had 6 denials. I'm just like, serious. It was over the stupidest things. It was just like, is the student going to have the device on their tray table? They denied it because I didn't put that in my report.
Oh my gosh.
So just be as specific and obvious. If you think it's stupid, still put it in there, because more likely you could get denied.
Oh yes, and paint a really vivid picture of what that student is like without that communication system.
Yep.
And I can't remember what section that's in, but paint a vivid picture of the behavior, of the social isolation, all of that. Get it in there. Be really, you know, don't hold back, I guess I would say. When you get to the trial of devices, you should include around 3 systems. And if you've had the student for a long time, or they've been in school a long time and they've tried different things, you probably have a history of the things they've tried. The last student that I did before I came to this job, he had done PECS. He had done sign language. He had done static, you know, printed out communication boards. And for a while, everybody gave up and said, you know, he's just not responding to any of this. And then the iPad came out, and I think my friend Lori Hunt is here. Lori said, let's get him an iPad. And that was the ticket for him. Highly motivated by that iPad. So I was able to tell this story of, we want the iPad because this is the only thing that he has responded to and learned to use independently. So boom, approved, you know, it was, but you have to really, really paint that picture for them of what has been tried and what worked and why did this work. So really get specific on there. They do ask, you know, that there's going to be 4 therapy sessions, and I do this early enough so that the 4 therapy sessions are just part of my school year. You write some goals. Usually there's like a, you know, use and charge of the device goals and some of the goals that you might be using in your therapy sessions. So that's not too bad. The last thing I want to talk about is the financial independence statement. You put your ASHA number, you sign it, but you want to make sure that if you're bringing in vendors, and I have brought in Toby Dynavox, sales rep, to try out some things with a student, make sure that you are the one making the decision and you are the one writing the report. We are very lucky in Oakland County that we get to borrow devices and try them out and send them back if they're not working. But in most other districts in Michigan, you have to do all of this yourself. And there are some vendors that will come in and say, hey, we'll do your assessment here, sign this evaluation that you didn't do, and say you're recommending our product. So you do not want to get into that situation with ASHA. You do not want to go to ASHA jail. It is bad. They will print it in the monthly magazine, your name and what you did. So steer clear of that. All right, let's move on. Just some tips. Keep a record of the students, the AAC systems that the student has used. I put that in the PLAF statement. And I know we don't want to be real specific in your SUP aids and services because the system might change over time. But I usually put a statement in the PLAF that says the student is the student needs a system that has these features. And then I say the student is currently using, and I just list the system. That way, if they move, the next district that gets them knows what they were using. Keep all of your AAC consideration reports because that's a great way to look back at that history of what have they tried in the past. And in your AAC consideration, make sure you state the reason why you're changing. In some cases, we had some issues with a certain device, or they outgrew their old device and they needed more vocabulary. Those are great things to include in your report. And like Laura said, start 2 years before they turn, before they're going to leave. You know, at that IEP the year before, you want to be talking about this stuff already. I did wait too long. The first one I waited too long. And the student graduated, we got rejected. I had to redo, kind of like what she was talking about. The student did get her device, but it was like 6 months after she left. So I felt terrible about that. So I always either start early yourself or get that family moving early on getting that assessment. I believe so strongly in this is that if you have questions or you need help with this process, please reach out to me and let me know. And are there any other questions that people have about this process, or, you know, questions for Laura, because she's been through this, or anybody else who's done this want to chime in and share anything? We will be happy to hear your input. Nobody? That was a lot of information, but, you know, chime in. We're gonna keep going ahead with some of the upcoming events, but if you have things you want to ask, just stop me, call out my name and stop me, or put it in the chat and we will stop and answer. So coming up, oh, somebody.
Is this, you recorded this? Yes, we can go back and relook at it somewhere.